Thank you all for coming together for this. Now, we are gracious to have an excellent panel with us here tonight, and I'm going to turn over the microphone right now back to Tom Arabia from the ISO to move on with the program, as I'm sure that we're eager to hear what they have to say and not waste any more time on this. Thank you so much.
And, of course, Professor Noam Chomsky. So I can go on with the introduction of Noam Chomsky then? In fact, I'll just let him take it from here. Thank you, Noam.
There are quite a range of topics to talk about. It's a lot of complex issues. I have a few minutes. I don't want to speak too long. And I'll just pick two topics and try to focus on them. A couple of words about something else. The two topics are, I'm not going to talk about the atrocities that took place in the last few weeks. I'm sure you're quite familiar with that. One question has to do with the legitimacy of the U.S.-Israeli invasion, and we should bear in mind, crucially, that it's a U.S.-Israeli invasion. We're critically involved at every level. So one has to do with its legitimacy. The second question that I want to talk about has to do with the reasons for it. Now, the two are intertwined, so what I say won't be entirely segregated, but I'll try to do it systematically. Now, as far as the legitimacy is concerned, it's almost universally assumed in commentary that the invasion is legitimate. It's criticized as being disproportionate, but it's legitimate because obviously a state has the result to defend itself against attacks from the outside. Well, there's a certain level of truth to that argument. Yes, a state has a right to defend itself from attack, but this argument moves very quickly to another position, namely that a state has the right to defend itself by force from attacks from the outside. And nobody believes that. If that's supposed to be the principle, it's, I think, universally rejected. So no one agrees that, say, Nazi Germany had a right to defend itself by force against the terror of the partisans in occupied Europe. Nobody, I suspect very few people here or around us would believe that the British had the right to defend themselves by force against George Washington's army. And the reasons are obvious. In both cases, they had no reason to be there in the first place. So therefore, I have no right of defense by force. And there was an easy way to defend themselves. Put a stop to the atrocities and the invasion and the aggression. And when that option is available, you just don't have the right to defend yourself by force. Or take, say, a useful analog, take the British in Northern Ireland. I mean, IRA terror was certainly criminal, and the British had a right to defend themselves from it. How? Not by violence, not by terrorizing the Irish Catholic community, but by addressing the grievances that led to the violence. And when they finally began to do so, the terror stopped. And you can think of case after case like that. So the universal agreement that Israel had a right to defend itself by force is not only wrong, but is transparently wrong. wrong on the basis of principles that virtually everyone accepts. Well, there's plainly if that reasoning is correct, there's plainly a crucial educational problem to face. Bring people to understand that by their own principles, their conclusions are absolutely illegitimate. And the reasoning's not profound, nothing deep about it, it's all on the surface. Let's turn to reasons. What were the reasons for the attack? There's an official reason. It was given, for example, by Ehud Barak, defense minister, who said Israel's had lost patience with the rocket attacks and therefore had to invade. That, of course, and that's accepted almost universally. Then there are debates about proportionality. But that has the same fallacy. You have to show that a reaction by force to rocket. You have a right to defend yourself from rocket attacks, surely, but it takes another step in the argument to show that you have the right to defend yourself by force against rocket attacks, as in the examples I mentioned and numerous others. And to show that, you have to show that there were no peaceful alternatives to doing so. Well, that doesn't have to be true. There are plenty of peaceful alternatives. I'll come to them in a minute. There has been further debate about the discussion about the reasons. One commonly proposed argument, which I think is accurate, is that Israel had to overcome what they call the lessons of the failed Lebanon War in 2006, when Israel lost what's called credibility, its deterrent capability. To put that in simple English, it had lost the ability to intimidate its adversaries into submission by the threat of extreme violence, and they had to recover that capability. It was probably a factor. As for the timing, probably had to do mostly with the Israeli elections, in fact, which are coming up in a couple of weeks. One Israeli commentator calculated at the very beginning of the war that for every 40 Palestinians killed, Barak gained one parliamentary seat. I'm not sure his arithmetic was exactly right, but the principle is, if you compare the polls and the casualties, comes out more or less like that. But none of that gets to the reasons. I think the reasons are different and much deeper. The reasons are pretty much explicit. They were explained by Ehud Olmert, the Prime Minister, right here in the United States in May 2006. He gave a speech to a joint session of Congress, rousing ovations, when he explained 2 points. One, a principle, another, implementation of it. The principle, he said, is that the historic right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is beyond challenge. Rousing ovation. There's a corollary to that. The original population doesn't have a right there. And in fact, the U.S. and Israel just took that position formally at the United Nations. Once again, last month, in December, there was a series of UN resolutions that were passed, mostly by about the same vote, something like 170 to 3 or something like that. This one passed 173 to 5. It was on the right of Palestinians to self-determination. The 5 against were the United States, Israel, a couple of Pacific Islands. That's the usual votes in the United Nations. And as usual, it doesn't get reported. So, for example, also unreported was the fact that there was a resolution on the right to food. Huge problem now. It's 1 billion people facing starvation. It's far worse than the financial crisis. But of course that deals with what one British diplomatic historian called the un-people, the ones who are different from us. So not discussed much. The vote on that was unanimous with 1 vote against, namely United